Ah, 1996, back before the iconic O6A and EA113 were discovered, Volkswagen intended on releasing a new engine called the AGN in 1996. Not a cool engine name by car guy standards, but when this engine first dropped, Volkswagen and Audi had an inauspicious start with their VW Mark IV Passats and the Audi A4s. So with the AGN's cunning and brand new design, this 1.8-liter naturally aspirated four-banger was released with the Golf 4 in 1997. It was able to put out 125 horsepower and 170 Nm of torque, which equals to about 125.39 foot-pounds of torque at 4,200 RPMs. And its maximum RPM limit was 6,000 RPMs at 125 horsepower, which was pretty high RPMs for a four-banger in 1997, to be honest. And all that power is transmitted to a front-wheel drive 5-speed manual gearbox. The engine itself featured a bore and stroke of 81 by 86.4 millimeters, a compression ratio of 10:3 to 1, 5 valves per cylinder, making it a 20-valve 4-cylinder engine, has a variable intake manifold, meaning it has intake flaps on the inside, a Bosch Motronic multi-port injection system with 317cc injectors. I mean, there's no doubt that the AGN gets a decent amount of gas mileage, but it did have some reliability issues, such as the water pump due to it being made of plastic, vacuum leaks, coil pack issues, and sludge buildup from the AGN's own poor oil maintenance. And according to my sources, some people said that the AGN sounded like a diesel from factory. Yeah, let's just say people weren't too fond of this engine and its performance, but overall, I guess the AGN is a pretty solid engine. It's pretty cheap to maintain, but again, it has some serious reliability issues. Plus, the performance is very underwhelming. A year later, in 1998, Volkswagen and Audi realized that the AGN engine wasn't really impressing its customers, so they redesigned the engine and added a KO3-005 turbocharger, which gave it an additional 25 horsepower. It was a small turbo, but it was enough to make a lot of people love this engine. The name was also changed to O6A, which VW added this engine to their Mark IV Golf GTIs, Jettas, and Passats, and these engines would make 150 horsepower at 5,700 RPMs and 210 Nm of torque, or 154.89 foot-pounds of torque at 1,750 RPMs. This engine has the same bore and stroke of 81 millimeters and 86.4 millimeters, just like the AGN, but has a lower compression ratio of 9:5 to 1 for extra boost. As for the intake and exhaust cam ratio, it's 190 degrees and 210 degrees, but the cam duration on the intake side may not flow or perform as well as the AGN, but the O6A makes 25 more horsepower and makes its full power about 300 RPMs short compared to the AGN. And again, the KO3 turbocharger is being utilized here by the O6A. It was set at 0.6 bar or 8.7 psi. It also utilizes a cast intake manifold with an updated multi-port injection system and utilizes the same 317cc injectors that the AGN uses. I also forgot to mention that the AGN originally used an iron block, which is exactly what the O6A uses, except the O6A has different engine internals and also has a forged crankshaft with cast pistons and connecting rods, although some 1.8T engines had fully forged internals in newer models. They just aren't designed for high power levels. And another thing is that around 2000-2001, the O6A basically got a bump in power and was able to make 180 horsepower and over 180 foot-pounds of torque. The 1.8Ts were not just used in the VW Golf GTIs, or the Jetta 1.8Ts. These were actually used in the Mark I Audi TTs back in the day. They would usually come with 180 horsepower from factory, and there's also a 225 model, which the name suggests, that would make 225 horsepower, which is the most powerful version of the O6A to date. The B5 Audi A4s came with the same treatment, it's just they made less power than a Golf GTI, landing in at 170 horsepower and 166 foot-pounds of torque. But at the end of the day, the 1.8T is a reliable turbocharged tuner-friendly engine, which brings me to the tuning side of the O6A. The power to cost ratio is mind-blowing with this engine. For example, you can get an a Unitronic Stage 1 ECU tune for $400 and gain an excess of 35 horsepower and 62 foot-pounds of torque without any supporting modifications. Maybe add a diverter valve, downpipe, or a turbo back, you're looking at 220, 230 crank horsepower. Add a bigger KO4 or KO4R turbocharger, some injectors, cams, cam gears, titanium forged pistons, and connecting rods, cold air intake, crankshaft pulley, upgraded intercooler, intake manifold, MAF housing, and a tune, fuel pump included. We're looking at about 500 or 600 horsepower here. But all of that power is enough for a 2,600 pound hatchback. Even though the Mark IV GTI is front wheel drive, just get an LSD, some grippy tires, and the 1.8T will dominate the streets. In 2004, Volkswagen developed a 2-liter turbocharged 16-valve 4-cylinder engine called the EA113. The EA113 was a direct replacement to the iconic 1.8T 20-valve engine used in the Mark IVs for their Mark V lineup. The EA113 took the base of the 2.0 FSI, known as 2-point-slow, and VW added direct fuel injection and the turbo. The biggest difference between the 2.0 FSI and the 2.0 TFSI is that the EA113's engine was reinforced with a cast iron cylinder block, 2 balancing shafts, a stronger crankshaft, newer pistons, and connecting rods for a lower compression ratio. Unlike the 1.8T and the 2-point-slow, the EA113 received a 16-valve dual-overhead cam head with a much stronger valve train. The EA113 again has an iron block and an aluminum head with a bore and stroke of 82.5 and 92.8 millimeters, intake and exhaust cam of 216 degrees and 224 degrees, making the EA113 produce 200 horsepower and 206.52 foot-pounds of torque, or 280 newton-meters of torque, with a red line of 6,200 RPM stock. But the EA113 makes its full power around 5,100 RPMs, basically outflowing the 1.8T in stock form and making the EA113 1.34 times more powerful than the last gen GTI. The EA113 uses a beefed up version of the KO3 turbo that has a peak boost pressure of 13.05 psi, which can handle more power and torque, and it's a small enough turbo to have little to no turbo lag. You guys would be pretty impressed with the performance capabilities of this Borg-Warner turbocharger. It's actually capable of 18 psi at 260.8 wheel horsepower and 282.6 wheel torque at 6,300 feet, which in my math is equivalent to about 320 wheel horsepower at sea level. As for the engine, there are multiple versions in 3 to 4 vehicles, such as the BPJ, which is the weakest of the 2.0 TFSI engines used in both the Audi A3s, 4s, 6s, and the Volkswagen Tiguan's. AXX, BWA, BWE, and BPY being the most popular version of the 2.0 TFSI engine lineup, as it was used in the VW Mark V GTIs and GLIs. BYD having a further reinforced engine block, conrods, and a bigger and more powerful KK KO4 turbocharger. CDL being the same as BYD, it's just max boost, is higher. And the most powerful EA113 was used in the Audi S3, which was called the BHZ, which made 265 horsepower. In terms of reliability, the EA113 has some common issues, such as the tendency of consuming a large sum of oil or knocking like a TDI due to the wear of the camshaft chain tensioner. So the N249 bypass valve has a tendency to fail due to poor construction and the fact that it will activate or engage pre-spool or off boost, which can throw off your MAF sensor and also cause your fuel system to go haywire, that will have a leak that will create itself, or the bypass valve will completely clog itself, hindering your performance, which can cause a huge loss in performance and bad acceleration, and also can increase carbon buildup. Now, unlike the 1.8T, the EA113 is also a very tuner-friendly engine. A Stage 1 ECU tune from Unitronic can get you from 200 to 245 crank horsepower and 280 foot-pounds of torque. Add a diverter valve in the cold air intake, you can reach 250 to 260 horsepower. Stage 2 is a whole different ballgame. Add a downpipe, diverter valve, cold air intake, a diverter valve relocation kit, an aftermarket intercooler, and a turbo back exhaust, you're looking at 260 to 276 horsepower and 295 to 330 foot-pounds of torque. Get the KO4 turbo plus the Stage 2 Plus ECU tune, you're looking at 335 crank and 335 foot-pounds of torque. The Stage 3 tune is available on Unitronic, and the tune will support up to 500 horsepower or more. The details are on the website and in the description. In 2019, VW and Audi unveiled a prototype race car called the Audi RC8 2.0 TFSI. Well, technically Audi Sport GmbH developed this car. It was intended to being Audi's new and improved DTM race car. It was actually the first boosted or turbocharged DTM engine to date, replacing Audi's DTM V8 engine, which was in service for about 19 years. The RC8 featured a cylinder bore and stroke of 86 by 90 millimeters with a die-cast aluminum alloy block and head with an insane compression ratio of 15:1. The camshaft specs are unknown, but I can only assume that it's stock. As for the RC8's engine internals, they are fully forged, and the RC8 was equipped with a Garrett single turbocharger producing 3.5 bar or 51 psi of boost. It also has a Bosch HDE V6 350 bar fuel injection, driven by a high pressure fuel pump and a Bosch Motronic MS 7.5 fuel management system. The oil system the RC8 uses is a dry sump system and uses a single mechanical water pump that feeds into a single cooling unit. In total, the RC8 made 640 horsepower at 9,000 RPMs and 439 foot-pounds of torque. This engine was also used in the Audi RS5 DTM as well, but in 2020 both cars were basically cancelled permanently due to regulation changes. What a bummer. Other than that, a tuning company called Dynodrome built the most powerful EA113 powered Audi S3 in 2015. It made about 1,010 horsepower or 1,262 crank horsepower and ran an 8.9 second quarter mile at 241 kilometers an hour.
But wait! There's more!
For the O6A, which was also tuned and used in the Audi S3, it made 1250 horsepower or 1000 wheel horsepower and could run a 7.6 second quarter mile at 302 kilometers an hour. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I put my soul into this video, and it'd be awesome if you guys could leave a like and subscribe. Anyways, peace out.